All right. Well, good evening. Hello, friend. Whether you are watching us live or watching us later on the internet, you have tuned in to the next episode of the Sharing Music series. My name is Jonathan Pape, and I am part of the Dedham School of Music. On behalf of all of us, thank you for being here. Over the course of the next 30 minutes and all the episodes that we've done in the past and all we will do in the future, we are going to introduce you to people who have chosen to make music a part of their lives. Some of the folks who are introduced and some of the folks who are involved may live down the street from you, while others you may be introduced to for the first time. Each month, we are inviting guests to talk about their favorite instrument, the styles they play, the music they listen to over and over again. We hope that when each of our episodes is over, you'll think a little bit differently about a style of music that never interested you before. Listen to a new playlist a little bit longer, and maybe, just maybe, you'll pick up that instrument you've always wondered about. In about 15 minutes or so, we're going to introduce you to a fine gentleman who's going to talk to you about bringing an original music idea to life. But we're going to kick this episode off with dismantling the struggling artist stereotype. And help us do that is one of my favorite performers, a great talent, wonderful person, and our first guest, Davina Yannetty. Good evening, Davina.
Hello, Johnny. Hello, viewers on the internet. Do I just go? Just going for it? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So as Johnny mentioned, I am a performer. I'm a full-time entertainer. My name is Davina Yannetty. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I've lived here my whole life. I love it here. I perform on various instruments and I travel all around the world doing it, except for the past year when, nobody did that. Anyways, so yes, I'm here to talk about the myth of the struggling musician, which I'm sure anybody watching this program is going to be familiar with. You've heard about, the broke musician with the lousy car, or eating ramen because you can't afford any other food, that kind of thing, or just somebody who's just hoping for, exposure to get discovered. And I feel like those myths maybe make people avoid getting into music in the first place. You can become a musician for a whole host of reasons. You can do it just for fun on the side. You can do it as a professional, but most of us don't do it to get famous. And I think that with simple business sense and drive to work hard, any talented person can make a good living as an entertainer, just like you would in any other profession. So as I mentioned, I'm a full-time musician. I've been entertaining full-time without any other work since 2014. Before that, I was also a teacher and I picked up the odd job here and there, but mostly I've just been making my living from music my entire adult life. So tonight we're gonna take a look at this stereotype of the struggling artist or the struggling musician or the struggling entertainer of any kind, really. And then I'm gonna go into what I think are some of the fundamentals of being a successful musician. So first of all, where does this myth come from? The struggling musician, the struggling artist? I think part of it is that we have this expectation of everybody's idea of success. What is it to be a successful musician? And a lot of people think that, well, to be successful, you have to be rich and famous. You have to be Mariah Carey or Eddie Van Halen or whoever. And that's just not the truth. There's a very small percentage of musicians who actually get to that stage. And you don't need to be rich and famous to earn a good living and enjoy your life. That's just silly. How many other jobs is it a requirement to become rich and famous to be successful? None. I would say none. It's really, when you get down to the core of it, it's just like any other job. So really, I want you to think about what is your idea of success, because that's going to look a little different for every person in every line of work and every musician. So your personal goals, do you want to own a house someday? Do you want to travel? Do you want to have kids, start a family? Or is your goal simply to do something every day that you love and just be a happy person? For me, my goal is really just to have the flexibility to spend time with my loved ones and do the things that I love to do. And being a working musician does afford me that flexibility. I can make my own schedule. I can make more or less money depending on how much I'm willing to work in that week, how many hours I'm willing to put in. And that's what does it for me. Your idea of success might look a little bit different, but again, it's just, it's something attainable, really, just again, like in any other job. And if you think about it in other fields, what does success look like there? Are you a hard worker? If you work in like a corporate environment, are you making profits or sales? Or are you, an entrepreneur in a certain industry? Are you making big changes there? The idea of success can look different for anybody in any industry, in any profession. And for most of those people, it does not involve being rich and famous at all. Two basic fundamentals, I think, for being successful at being a working musician. And again, I'm talking about mostly being an entertainer, a performer, but there are so many other facets. There's teaching, there's composing, like Joseph is going to talk about later. There's producing, which Joseph is also a producer. So there's so many facets to this, but I'm just talking about being a performer full time. The first fundamental is to be smart, be creative, have a strategy for how you're going to live your life as an entertainer. It's generally a freelance job, so you do have to have some discipline. And you also need to decide, especially if you're a younger person trying to decide kind of what your path is going to be after school. How are you going to hone your skills as a musician? Because you obviously need to learn some things. You need to learn how to play your instrument. You need to learn how to be in front of an audience. How are you going to hone those skills? Obviously, one very popular choice is college, music school, conservatory. And you can also sort of take your own track, take private lessons from a few different teachers, and just find performance opportunities where you can. Benefits of college, obviously, you have a lot of experience in college. You're playing in a lot of ensembles. You're learning from a lot more teachers than you probably would if you're just doing it on your own. And you kind of have a bit of a more diverse experience in terms of you're playing lots of different repertoire and you're meeting lots of different people. You're networking with fellow students and teachers, and you're working with different teachers, like I said, more than you would doing it just sort of on your own path. Of course, college has its drawbacks, and I am a big supporter of, you don't need college to do what I do. Does it help? It can. Yes, you can become a better musician by going to college, but it's not necessary. It's expensive. It's very expensive. I myself was a Berklee student and I left because I couldn't afford it. I even had scholarships and I just still didn't want the student debt hanging over my head. So I left and I kind of took the other path of taking private lessons and just getting myself out there. So you need to decide what's right for you, what feels good for you. If you're more of a self-starter, taking your own path is probably great. If you need a push, then school is probably the way to go. Another part of your strategy is also going to be managing your income as a musician, because most of us, again, as freelancers, we have varied income. For instance, somebody who primarily works in a wedding band is going to be very busy from May to October, and they need to figure out how to budget their money for the rest of the year. And I know budget is like this alarm word, like people just kind of fall asleep. They don't want to hear it, but it's very, very important. And something you need to remember is that you need to find a budget that works for you. When I first tried to start budgeting years ago, I thought there was just one way to do it. Everything is just X amount of dollars per month and I have to stick to it. It doesn't have to be like that. Do some research, find out what works for you. I have a weekly budget and I allocate a percentage of my income every week to certain things. So you need to decide what's going to work for you and what's going to work on a variable income. But it's really, really important. I implore you, if you want to become a musician, learn how to budget your money. Those to me are the two big main points in terms of just being smart about it. Be scrappy, have a strategy, have a plan. Now, the other part is, how do you get your foot in the door? Because it's not like, you leave college, you apply to an entry-level job, you work your way up in the company. It's not like that when you're a musician. There are dues to pay, unfortunately. It's a thing. you might have to, when you're starting out, you'll play some gigs for no money or for little money or for food or something like that. It's okay. As long as you obviously have some way to support yourself otherwise, or if you're lucky enough to have somebody to help support you. But that's a very important part of the process, is just getting on a stage and performing as much as you possibly can. And that's going to do a few things for you. Number one, it's networking, right? You show up to the gig, you show up on time, you know all the songs, you're easy to get along with. People are going to remember that, and they're going to refer you to other gigs. Networking is like the number one way to get jobs in this industry. Meet people and do well for them. And it's also going to help you just figure out what you like, what you don't like. Do you like playing a gig where you kind of feel like you're the wallpaper and people are just eating dinner? I love those gigs. I'm an introvert. Or do you want the kind of gig where you're up in front of a crowd and everybody's, you know, drinking and screaming and partying? What do you want? What do you like? You can use that sort of paying your dues time to figure that out. And another part of paying your dues is to practice your instrument. You will never get to the point where you are a perfect musician. None of us ever will be, ever. So keep practicing. It is also a very common thing to see somebody who's been gigging for a long time. Maybe they have a decent job with a band that they play with steadily, and you know, they're just kind of out of it. They don't practice anymore. They don't care. Don't be that person. Keep practicing your instrument, keep getting better. You're never too good to go back to lessons. You're never too good not to practice. Keep going, because you're going to keep getting better, and you can get better gigs and more money and more money. You might not have to have as tight of a budget if you make more money, which is very nice. So those are just sort of the things of the parts of paying your dues that I think are important. Eventually, you will get to the point where the phone calls are just coming in and you're saying no to people because you don't have the time. That's when you know you're kind of out of that paying your dues phase, and you have to start deciding, again, go back on that. What do I like? What do I not like? Do I want to go really far away for a gig? Do I like being away from home? Do I want to travel? Do I want to be close to home and close to my family? Those are all the questions you can start to ask yourself once you get to that point where, all right, I've been doing this for a while and I think I'm pretty good at it, and people want me and people are calling me. So again, you need to remember your version of success is what's going to make you a successful musician. You need to remember that you are able to make it work if you're smart about it, if you keep a budget, and if you have a plan for how you're going to hone your skills and keep them sharp. And you need to remember that there is hard work at the beginning to get your foot in the door. But once you get there, as long as you keep working, the work will just keep coming in. It's like magic. That's my spiel about how I'm succeeding in the music industry and how others are doing the same thing.
That's awesome. Let me ask you a couple questions.
Yeah.
So you've learned a lot. You've definitely traveled around and seen some shows. You've traveled up and down. You've had a passport for a reason. Who is the example for you, or did you have to figure this out on your own? Like, was there a roadmap that you were given, or someone sort of pulled you under their wing, or would you have appreciated? Maybe the better question is, would you have valued that more?
I think there were definitely people that took me under their wing in certain areas, but I shouldn't say never. It is rare that I meet somebody who holds all of the ideals or has obtained all of the goals that I wish for myself.
Sure.
I mean, I guess that goes with anything, right?
Yeah.
But you know, for instance, I have a mutual friend of yours and mine, actually, Johnny, Mr. Corn Ashley.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
You've heard of him.
Talented fellow. Yeah.
Talented fellow. He's a songwriter. He's a guitar player, a bass player, a singer. He plays in wedding bands. He owns a talent agency. I learned a lot from him about how to be desirable on a gig. You need to obviously have a good personality, act like every show is the biggest show of your life, because it kind of is. Even on those nights where you think it's like there's not enough people in the crowd or not enough people are listening, you know what, you're still there and you're playing, and it's going to be great. And you can bring people along for the ride if you have the energy for it. And he also, you know, because he's an agent, he's seen people kind of in the ups and downs, and he's a line I've heard him say before is, nobody works as hard as the guy who doesn't have the gig yet. So in other words, if you've been doing this for a while, like,
Sure.
don't lose that spark,
Yep,
keep
yep.
working, even if you have the gig, keep working. Don't be that guy.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to Joseph. Would you recommend for someone in your position or any position like yours, pardon me, one instrument, focusing your craft, or should you be prepared to do all the things?
Ooh, that's a good question. For me personally, as you can see, I have my pianos here. It's I play multiple instruments, and that's what works for me. I had a strong desire to learn multiple instruments, and I do find it's helped me to get more work, because someone calls you and says, "Do you play the mandolin?" I'll learn.
You're right. Sure. Great.
So I think that learning multiple instruments is a good idea. However, there's also the argument that, first of all, some people just don't have the aptitude or the desire to learn multiple instruments. And you just want to focus on the piano your whole life and be way better at it than I am. Yes, I respect that completely.
Perfect.
I think it's really more of a personality thing.
Got it. Awesome answer. And thank you.
Thank you.
For your talk. That was really wonderful to hear.
Thanks.
I do appreciate it. All right. We're going to keep moving on. We're going to let Davina catch her breath, and I am going to say thank you. And now, I'm speaking of many instruments, speaking of all sorts of other music, I want to turn things over to a very talented fellow who I got to see perform a handful of times in some of the events that go on in Dedham. I participated in something called the Dedham Square Crawl. I watched Joseph perform and really steal the show for a lot of things. So it's a real treat for me tonight to invite him and have him here talk to us about bringing a musical idea to life. Without further ado, Mr. Joseph Borsellino Jr. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you to Dedham School of Music for having me. This is an honor and a privilege. As Johnny mentioned, I'm here to talk about bringing a musical idea to life. In particular, I'm going to focus my little talk here on a specific piece of music that I wrote around this time last year, a little bit towards the spring. This is a piece I wrote titled "The Police State," and it is a reaction to the nationwide protests that began at the peak of our pandemic last year. We were all there. We all saw it on TV. I saw it there as well as firsthand. The day that I was due to move out of my Philadelphia apartment and move back home to Dedham, I was in a U-Haul van with my girlfriend and all of my belongings, and we were just stuck in traffic because of all the protests that were happening, and just witnessing people on all sides of the U-Haul van, police officers and protesters just sparring. And it was a very intense experience, very transformative one at that. And I knew from that point forward that as soon as I got home, I would look to document my experience musically. And that leads us to the police state. So I started off with the bass line. Generally, I might start off with a melody, but in this case, I wanted to start off with more of the accompanying role and actually sort of subvert that role into that of a lead instrument. So I knew I wanted something very like nebulous and sort of dark and dissonant. So immediately I was thinking of the movie Jaws, and how they go down here, maybe. They maybe start off a little slow and then they work into it, right? So I kept that motif in mind for my piece. These are the two notes that I use. And I knew I wanted it to be a little spacier. Using these different colors, these dissonant colors and these bright colors, right? Dissonant colors and bright colors. So I started to sculpt my bass line. I want it to be this very sort of mechanical, cold, unempathetic, unfeeling sort of vibe. I wanted it to be very much like the powers that be or the structures that I've observed in my life that led me to write this piece. My experience at this protest. So I wrote this out, this very just sort of calculated ostinato, we call it, a repeated bass line figure. And then to contrast, I wanted my melody to be much more simplistic and emotional. So I was thinking something flowing and, you know, just again, my intent to juxtapose the two melodies, the people, the protesters, the police, and the powers that be, you know, the resistance, right? So that's the melody I arrived at using the same notes of the bass line, but just in a very different sort of style. So going back to the piano, I'll show you what I just did. Those are my notes. Variation on the theme. Okay, and then I wanted to harmonize it. I'm thinking, if I do it in sevenths, I get this really dissonant sound. I like that very much. I'm going to add a little bit more of a crunch to it, add some notes in the middle. And then I ended up with this shape here. Oops. And I knew that those were the two ideas I had going forward. I had my bass line and my melody. So then I went to my music DAW, which I use Logic. And as you can see here, I've laid out all of the parts that I tracked independently from my home studio. I have up top, I have my bass parts. In the gold, I have all of my saxophone parts, my percussion in the green, my guitars in the red, my auxiliary sound effects in the blue, more percussion here, and then keyboards. So I'm going to play for you just a brief snippet of the bass line that you heard. Okay, and let me double check that I'm sharing my audio. I am. Beautiful. Here's that bass line. So just a brief sample, right, for the interest of time. Now let me contrast that with the main melody that I was showing you, the more emotional, legato, flowing one, right? And now when I layer them together, it sounds like this. And now I'm going to show you the same thing with my percussion, just so you get the full sound. And that's the main theme of the song. Okay. After that, I managed to assemble some friends. We did a little bit of a live demonstration of it, just played it, hearing it on acoustic instruments. And I'm going to give you just a couple seconds of that. But then I'm going to jump into the present and how this piece has transformed and really been brought to life, I would say. So here's a little bit of my demo. Okay, so after doing that, not much really happened with the piece. And then I began my first semester at New England Conservatory of Music, New England Conservatory, I always butcher that, where I've been studying for a year, and I'm going into my second year of master's. And through this program, the very first time I was tasked with writing larger ensemble music, orchestral big band music. And I knew that I wanted to magnify this piece. I wanted to maximize the sound, make it a much larger, more emotional simulation of what I was going through emotionally about, you know, the subtext of the piece. And I managed to, with the help of my mentors, put together a large ensemble arrangement. And I'll show you a sample of it. As you can see here, if you look towards the bottom of your screen, this is me conducting with my hat on. I wasn't aware that we were being filmed, so I'm a little dressed informally. My apologies for anybody. This is just a little bit of the same piece, now orchestrated for a 17-piece big band. Okay. And now finally, so with this piece, on a whim, one of my professors had suggested that I apply for the International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers inaugural Emerging Black Composer Prize. And I entered this piece as my submission, wrote my personal statement on what it meant to me, and it's been an honor that I have been selected, and this piece was chosen for the prize. In addition, it was performed and broadcasted by Germany's WDR Big Band, which is the last clip of audio that I'll share with you, is them conducting and performing my piece. It all started from, you know, a really traumatic, crazy experience I had in Philly with my girlfriend, to, you know, wanting to personify that event musically, wanting to represent the police with some sort of motivic device and represent the people with another, and to, you know, have that interplay be the theme and concept of my piece. So without further ado, here is the Police State once more, performed by WDR's Big Band. Once again, that was my piece, The Police State, performed by Germany's WDR Big Band this past March. I'll return the floor to Johnny.
Thanks, man. That was a treat. That was a real treat to listen to. I'm glad got to play that out. I have a couple questions for you as well, if you don't mind sticking around for a couple minutes. Let me run these through you. So first off, thanks for sharing the timeline, right? Like, it was really interesting to see how you evolved this. And with that in mind, what I wanted to ask you to speak to, if you could, a little bit was when you worked on individual instruments, you talked a little bit about the bass, for example. Were you envisioning an individual instrument as like a specific, to represent something specific, or was it was it broader? Because you talked about, you also brought in the idea of the theme. And what I wondered if you could speak a little bit to of when you built the theme, was one part representative of one area and another thing, or were you going for just a bigger aura vibe? I'm kind of struggling because I don't want to speak for you, right? Like I'm trying to figure out to cue you up so you can kind of give me an understanding of what the theme, where the theme came from, using some of the parts, right?
Yeah, I think the best way to explain that is just is for me to sort of speak in tandem with the music again. So as I mentioned, this bass line, the G on the bottom, in the big band version, it was the guitar, bass, and piano sort of playing this in unison. For me, that sort of represents this very rigid society, this structure, particularly the police force in my subtext. And the melody here is almost has nothing to do with the other melody. They happen simultaneously, and there's this friction that's created between the two of them. So this is like a very uncaring, almost sort of very mechanical melodic theme. And then here you have this more emotional, spaced out, harmonized melody between the voices, the saxophones and trumpets and trombones. For me, that represents more so the people, more so there's a more human aspect to that melody. Now, if you can sort of jog your ears, there was a portion in the song where the same sort of melodic theme was retained, but in a new section. So this is the first time the piece ever goes into harmony, and it's the same melodic shape and arc. And I brought it to harmony as a moment of optimism, as a moment of like this brief glimpse of like, oh, we've left the system, we've left this, because this is, in musical terms, this is called a mode. When you have a certain set of pitches, right, and you don't deviate from them. That's another layer to the theme. I have a mode in place because I'm implying that there's discomfort and tension associated with the limitation. And in musical terms, it's this group of pitches here that we don't leave from. When we get to here, we get all these different colors, this richness that wasn't previous. And for me, that represents again this moment of optimism in a very American sense. Even the groove switches to a swing pattern there, from the sort of rock influence 3/4 groove that you heard.
Yeah.
On the the beginning and tail end of the piece, which sort of sandwiches all the material. In the middle, there's these moments of swinging that happen. And then, I mean, the 2 to 3 minutes in the middle of the piece of the orchestra iteration, where you had all that sort of chaos going on with the soloist, I mean, it doesn't take much more of an imagination. That's sort of the chaos associated with the subtext, this battling of all these forces, and this basically this, there's not much in the way of answers for these problems and questions, and they've been going on for such a long time. And I feel like as composers, as writers, and as artists, it's not always on us to have the answers to these things, but to really just document our experiences and our testimony.
What I appreciated about that moment that you were describing too was that there was no resolve, right?
Yes.
It did not resolve itself in some maybe sort of what somebody might call pop sort of way.
Yeah, and the piece ended the way it began, with the same, I mean, in a jazz sense, it's the head in, head out. I retained that formula for this because I specifically wanted to say, despite all that happened, we're still here. These are still problems that we need to talk about. So
I got you. I thank you for walking me through that. So last question I had for you. What happens to this piece? So I definitely picked up on a little, once your teacher got involved and said, big bend, right? You got to write something bigger. What would happen? And I don't know, maybe this is too speculative, but I'm gonna throw it out. What happens to this piece if the big band assignment doesn't come your way? Where do you think it goes?
So provided that I wasn't given the opportunity to write a big band piece, where would it have gone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so I should mention that demo that I showed you with all the layers in my Logic, my digital workstation. As much as that was just sort of a playground, a rough draft for me to throw ideas onto a canvas, I do treat all of my projects in that mode as final products. So, I've contemplated releasing that demo as a single, or, as a collection of, remote recordings, sort of with digital interference, as a standalone piece of work. So at the very least, if the large ensemble thing hadn't happened, I may have wanted that demo with a little more refinement, better mixing and mastering and whatnot, to be the Police State as we know it. It was just a matter of, this is my first semester ever composing for a large ensemble. Naturally, I don't have quite as much material as more established large ensemble composers. So I had this, and there's so much potential still within this piece that I knew that I could do something better.
Yeah, it was really a question for me of like, how much did the big band, did that approach influence the direction?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Especially when the conductor Stefan of WDR reached out to me and asked me for my conducting notes. He wanted to know what everything was about, right? And I had to sort of retroactively assign meanings to some of these musical,
dial it in, sure.
As well as be able to vocalize what I was thinking and what I was feeling, because it's hard to articulate a lot of these things. So this whole process with the big band and having WDR take it on, having to communicate with them, it really made it more into a thematic piece, in addition to just sort of an idea or a moment of venting emotional exhaustion and frustration. It became a thesis, I suppose, in a way, when I had to really be able to, as I'm sitting here now, articulate what this was like. There's become sort of a rhetoric attached to the piece now that I've had to relay it to other people, not just have it here or here.
Well, it's one of, and I want to wrap you up, but it's one of those things where you listen and I can unpack my own thoughts and I can hear my own feelings about them each moment, right? But to hear how you layered it, and like I said, timeline for a reason, right? Like as you structured it, to hear that and to understand how you were going through it. And again, it circles back to the idea of bringing something to life, which was great. So this was a real treat, Joseph. Can you share with us, or is there anywhere that folks can see the whole piece again? Either can you share it with me, or generally, and maybe we'll put it up on the Facebook page, because it was great. Great treat.
Yeah, I think that should be doable. The YouTube link is, I believe, unlisted, but it's been just about everywhere. So awesome. I don't think they would take issue with it.
Why don't you send it over, or you can put it on the Facebook page later when we log off, so folks can see it. And there it is. All right, so we'll take it. We'll put it up there. I want to wrap you up. I want to swing back, and I thank you for your time and sharing this as well. So with that in mind, I want to a big thanks to Joseph, and also to our first guest, Davina, for volunteering their time to be here with us. And thank you, as always, to Mr. Monahan for helping out behind the scenes, keeping the lights on. We hope that when each of our episodes is over, you'll think a little bit differently about a style of music that never interested you before. Listen to a new playlist a little bit longer, and maybe, just maybe, you'll pick up that instrument you've always wondered about. If you enjoyed our program and are interested in taking a lesson or a class with our school, we have posted our contact information on our Facebook page and our website, dedhamschoolofmusic.org. It has all our classes, and we cannot wait to meet you. Come see us this summer. You want to get out of the sun? We'll be here for you. If you are interested in supporting our school and programming like this, we've done our best to make that as easy as possible. There is a donate button at the top of our page, sort of there. Please let us know, because we want to say thank you. We're grateful for all of the support. Our next episode is July 11th. We're going to talk about being an opera singer. and a little instrument, my favorite instrument, the electric guitar. Until then, I appreciate you logging in and paying attention and listening. I appreciate thanks to Joseph and Davina. And on behalf of everyone from the Dedham School of Music, I would like to say thank you. And I'm going to sign off and say good night. Thank you much. Bye-bye.